Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be a skill breakdown on Sir Bors. Sir Bors is a neutral marksman that you recruit during Act 2. I believe his recruitment mission is around level 8. And Sir Bors, he's a fairly fun marksman as far as marksmen go. I do like using him. There's obviously some power balance issues with him, like all marksmen, but among them, I do think he is one of the stronger ones, and he has some unique abilities to him that I think make him stand out a little bit. Unfortunately, even after the balance patch happens, and the marksmen finally get that buff that a lot of players have been asking for, he's still not going to be great. And that's because of this negative trait here, lazy. Can't go on 3 missions in a row. This means you can bring him on 2 missions, then you have to sub him out. So this makes it really hard for him to be a consistent A-team party lineup member, because you're constantly going to be having to swap him out over the course of an entire campaign. So this is really, really important that you use one of the tomes that removes the negative trait. Take lazy away from him if you really want to use him. Now if you have a bunch of marksmen that maybe you're having in your lineup, like you can see here, I have 3 currently on my round table, so it's not a huge deal if I have to like swap him out or something. But it's definitely annoying, because then you'll have to like swap around some of your gear to whoever you're subbing in for him to make sure they're performing at the same level he may have been. All of that aside, let's go ahead and just get into the skills. Beginning with Tier 1, it's mostly the same stuff you've seen before on other marksmen, though he does have a unique ability, and we'll get to that in a second. Beginning with Shoot as usual. 4 AP, 100% weapon damage, base range of 8, it's at 9 because of a Tier 3 upgrade, with the bonus damage upgrades of Torture for 20% against burning units, and Weak Spots for 20% against poison. He does have the ability to set poison on his own, so Weak Spots does self-synergize. If you want to take Torture, make sure you're bringing someone who can set the burn condition. Of course, there's Piercing Arrow and Elusive. Piercing Arrow, of course, lets you ignore some armor, and of course, Elusive being the ability that reduces cooldown just by 1 when you get a killing blow with this unit. Earlier on in the game, this is actually pretty easy to do, even on higher difficulties. Marksmen are very strong earlier in the game. As it gets later to the game, as it currently stands, this is something you're probably going to want to move away from. Hopefully after the balance patch, they'll be doing good enough damage where they can still get some killing blows on some of those far targets that the rest of your party maybe can't reach, and help with their cooldown cycling a little bit better. His first active ability is going to be Poison Arrow. This is one of the abilities that self-synergizes with that Weak Spots ability. 100% weapon damage, sets the poison condition, which is a 10% dot, and a 20% damage reduction debuff. With the upgrades, you have Agony Shot, which increases the duration of the poison. Toxic Arrow, which increases the damage. Sickness applies a 20% vulnerability while they are poisoned. Last upgrade of Poison Blast, if the initial shot kills the target, units within 2 tiles of your target become poisoned. This does apply to friendlies, I believe, but generally speaking, you're going to be shooting units that are farther away, so the risk of friendly fire I found is very, very minimal. For his unique ability, we have Mark Target, causes 20% vulnerability against ranged attacks against the target for 1 turn. This is a super cheap ability with good range. Cooldown isn't bad either. It's because of this ability that I've been trying to play around with some heavily range stacked teams with some mixed massive success. I'm definitely going to give it another try after the balance patch, see what happens. I really like this ability, just a very high ranged vulnerability debuff. It's solid. With the upgrades, the first one is Evil Eye, increasing the vulnerability amount by 10%, so now 30%, pretty good. Blink, reducing the cost by 1, that's what brings it down to this 1 AP cost, though I believe he does start with this upgrade, so that's really useful. Entangle, slow the target for 1 turn. This is just more of that ranged crowd control. You know, you put it on a target, they now take extra damage and are now less likely to reach your party, especially if you're going with that strategy I was kind of mentioning earlier about being very heavily range-focused team comp. And then Deadeye, increase the range by 2, which would bring this up to 10, which is very high ranged. Going into passives, we do have the upgradable Scout, the base one, of course, being 1 movement AP and 1 perception. With the upgrades, we have +2 movement AP for the first turn of the encounter with Recon, evasive, -6 from ranged attacks. On the run, you gain an extra AP on your next turn if you spent 5 on your current turn moving. This effect is alright, but I think it's a little too weak. And then first dodge, first ranged hit against Cerberus will just automatically miss. And then some more of the standard passive stuff. Deflection, -7 damage from ranged attacks. Taking these two together is pretty good, -13. That's not a small amount. Adrenaline, +1 AP when killing a unit. Again, this is a lot stronger early on. Later game currently starts to fall off. After the balance patch, this may be a little bit better and maybe more worth taking. And then ready, +20% Overwatch. I use Overwatch a lot early game, not a lot late game. It's kind of a common theme with a lot of Marksman abilities. Act 1, Act 2, lots of great picks. Act 3, 4, not so much. Going into Tier 2, we have a lot of familiar stuff, but a couple things that are unique to Cerberus that I think are really nice thematic changes for him. Going in order, though, we have the usual aimed shot, a high damage ability that drains all of your AP, and the more AP you use, the more damage it does. It has a base cost of 4, so you need at least 4 to activate it, and it does have a higher range than your other moves by default. Going into the upgrades, you gain 2 movement AP if you kill a unit when using this, so it's basically trying to give you a little bit back if you manage to land a kill to kind of maybe move back a bit, reposition. The second one is direct hit, 20% weapon damage, which is a pretty big amount for aimed shot when you're using it against an unarmored unit. This means a unit that just has no armor currently, whether they have no armor to begin with, or if they had maybe 6 armor but it's all been broken, they count as unarmored. Long range shot, increase the range by 2. That's what helps give it that really high range. And then unblockable shot, it can no longer be blocked. This one is really kind of a must-have, I think, if you're going to use this ability. There's a lot of times where you'll be shooting into an enemy shield, and that's one of the big killers for Marksman damage, is block values. So being able to ignore that, the damage dealing on this ability will become much more consistent. Standard mobility move, it's not super amazing, but it's a lot more than a lot of other classes have, so by default, dash is a pretty good mobility move. Just keep in mind it moves in a straight line, so you can't go through terrain or obstacles. Range of 2 to 8, you can't just sidestep over 1. And when you move with this ability, you don't provoke attacks of opportunity. This first upgrade, I'm not a big fan of it. You decrease the AP cost of Overwatch by 1 after dashing, so basically you can dash and then Overwatch, and then I guess maybe get extra Overwatch attacks in because the attacks cost 1 less. I think the idea with this one is sort of a reposition then set up a sentinel kind of position. Generally, I'm using dash to either move into a position to start shooting an enemy in the back or to escape an enemy. I'm not really concerned about going into Overwatch if I'm using dash. Sprint, decrease the AP cost by 1, which makes it a cost of 1, which is amazing. Extended dash, increase the range by 2, bringing that up to 8. Big difference between 6 and 8. And persistence, reduce the cooldown by 1, bringing it down to 2. So you'll be able to use this multiple times per encounter pretty regularly, if needed. Next is the Alchemist passive. I'm actually a really big fan of this one. You definitely want to take this. And I think even after the balance patch, this will continue to just really help them further. Decrease the AP cost of skills that cause poison by 1. So now that poison arrow is costing 3, so now it's a stronger and cheaper version of your basic shoot attack. With the upgrades of extra damage, another 10% weapon damage for skills causing poison. Long duration, the duration of poison effects is increased by 1 turn. Master Poisoner, poison skills damage reduction is increased by 50%. I've mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating. This is multiplicative, not additive. That means that the damage reduction on this ability does not get an extra 50%, meaning it now does minus 70% damage. It's 50% of the base, 20, which is 10. So 20%, 50% of that is 10%, 20 plus 10, 30%. I have asked the devs about this directly, and they have confirmed this. And They have mentioned as a response to this that they are looking at changing this a little bit to either potentially make it stronger or just make it more clear what it does. Then we have corrosion. They lose 2 armor at the start of their turn. 2 armor is just so little. I don't think it's worth taking. They need to change the scaling on this. So now for the first different ability of his, we have Unyielding. This is something you will probably recognize from your defenders. Mordred especially, as everyone uses Mordred, I'm sure you'll recognize this. Regains 7 HP for each hit. This comboed with a passive we're about to get to, you can tell they're trying to make Boris sort of the tanky marksman with some self-healing. I think it's kind of an interesting approach. I haven't played around too much with it. Medium armor, I feel like it's still a little too frail. Could maybe stand to get a little bit of buff to how strong it is defensively. So later in the game, this strategy I don't think is the best. But he does have an AoE in tier 3 that could definitely get a lot of HP off a single move with this. So there is that. With the upgrades, extra 10% vitality, extra HP for plus 5% HP from armor sigils. That one's really good. Ruthlessness, an additional 7 HP for each kill. So you have to hit something to kill it, so that means on a kill you're getting 14 HP, which is not bad. I mean, you can see currently he has 56. That's a pretty decent percentage. And physical resistance plus 15% physical debuff resist. Jumping over one real quick to play off of the Ruthlessness, we have Skirmisher. He can wear medium armor. So circling back to first shot, we have plus 15% weapon damage for the first attack on each turn. As long as you didn't spend any regular AP, movement AP is okay. Just helps you get a little bit of that extra oomph to that first attack each round. Boosts their damage somewhat. Going into tier 3, it's sort of a lot of the same stuff you've seen before. We have Poison Bomb, AP cost of 3 with the Alchemist upgrade, and the upgrade here we'll cover in a second. 3x3, 70% weapon damage, much like Fire Blast, but honestly kind of weaker because poison damage-wise isn't really as strong as fire is, and it's a tier 3 ability, so... With Pestilence, it now causes poison. With Potent Blast, it's plus 15% weapon damage, so 85%. Acid Blast, reduce armor by 5 on all targets hit. And Reliable Toxins, decrease the cost by 1. So this originally has a cost of 5. This is definitely not worth using for 5, I think. 3, I think, is a fair cost, given how kind of underwhelming it is. Unfortunately, it is also the only AoE he gets, so you still take it because any AoE is better than no AoE. Next, we get to Cover Expert. I've gone into some changes I think they should make to this entire ability in the past, so I won't go into that again. But what it does, plus 1 range for all skills from cover, that's not too bad. Sharpshooter, plus 10% weapon damage dealt from cover, plus 20% physical debuff resist if you're in cover. Sustained armor, all your armor is unbreakable while you're in cover. This ability actually is pretty good with Sir Boris, because he's a medium armor user as opposed to the other marksmen which are light armor. Having 17 unbreakable armor is not bad. That's actually pretty good, as opposed to, you know, a normal marksman who has like 5 or 6 at most. And then finally, Protected. Being in cover reduces all damage you take by an additional 10%. Next we have Long Reach, a must-have because it's plus 1 range for all your attacks without having to be in cover. And then with the upgrades, Eagle Eye, plus 10% weapon damage if a unit is at least 6 tiles away from you. Pretty common thing, easy to land. Far Shot, plus 1 range for your skills when you're at maximum AP. So basically your first ability of the round of the turn has 1 extra range to it. Generally you're going to be in a position where all your abilities can reach them anyways without this plus 1 range, so this is kind of not good. Disengage, plus 10% weapon damage while Sir Boris is disengaged. That means there are no enemy units within 5 tiles of him. That feels a little high. So this one, the uptime on it will kind of waver because obviously enemy units are going to be rushing in towards your party. So if he's near your party, this will disrupt this ability. But there's still a couple turns where you can, you know, get lots of use out of this. And then Prepared, plus 25% weapon damage for the first attack in the encounter. This stacking very nicely with First Shot. Going into his last unique ability, we have Smothering Shot. It's a pretty cool one. I like it. It deals 100% weapon damage and causes silence. This lasts for 1 turn, and you can see Silence causes non-basic skills to cost +4 AP. You shoot this onto a spellcaster, or just any enemy unit that you know has extra abilities. I mean, like a picked chosen and their invulnerability. If you want to stop them from using invulnerability, you can use this on them. A picked warrior who has rage. Plenty of spellcasters, like I mentioned before. The Seelie, they have, you know, those Winterborn and their axe throws that can stun. The Centaur-looking guys that, you know, have a charge. Some of them have blinds. The Fog Knights. I mean, there's so many abilities that your enemies have access to depending on what unit you're looking at. This can be very good single target lockdown. As a very high cooldown, I wish that was lower, but it's a very strong ability. With the first upgrade of Quick Hand, you reduce the cost by 1, bringing it down to 3. And then with Burst Lungs plus 15% weapon damage, 115%. And then the third upgrade is Slowness. Now Smothering Shot also slows the target for a turn. And Suffocation. Smothering Shot now causes weakness for 1 turn, so that they deal 33% less damage. So with 1 move, 3 AP, 150% weapon damage, you can silence, slow, and weaken a single target. 3 debuffs for 1 ability is really, really good. That's a very efficient move. I really like this ability. It's a really good move. I think the cooldown maybe reduce it down to 4, but even as it is, it's a very strong move. Then the final passive upgrades, we have Evasion, dodge the first incoming melee attack, Scout, +1 movement AP, +1 perception, and then Hunter, AP cost of all skills reduced by 1 while only 1 enemy is present. Basically, this is just for fighting bosses. Not even great for a lot of bosses, as a lot of them can summon extra minions. So that is Sir Bors. I'm sure you could tell as I was describing the abilities. He has a lot of stuff I actually think is really cool, and I'm a fan of both thematically, gameplay-wise, how they try to make him more diverse and stand out a bit from the other marksmen. He's pretty cool. I do like playing with him. I really hope that the balance patch does give the marksman the sort of boost they need, because I'd really like to start using him more in the end game. There's a couple tweaks to some more specific abilities. I'm not too sure may get the sort of tweak I'm looking at, because this balance patch for them seems like it's going to be more broad to marksmen in general. I'm not sure how close of a look they're going to be taking at individual marksmen. Like, for example, I don't know if there's going to be a buff to Smothering Shot, but there may be a buff to, you know, this Cover Expert ability, or their Poison Bomb ability. If you're playing on story or normal difficulty, you really can, I think, bring marksman to all of your missions and be perfectly fine. Unless if it's Sir Bors, because again, he has this lazy trait. You can bring him to 2 missions, then he has to sit 1 out, and that's just... It's not a huge hit to, like, your gameplay efficiency, unless he's your only marksman, I guess, and you really like bringing marksman, but it's really annoying, I think. So, if you want to use him, you really need to get rid of that trait with one of the trait removal tomes. And that wraps it up for this video. That's all I have for you. Thanks for watching.